Hello and welcome to the Vulcan Ability Classroom, which is what I'm calling a series that's going to be available for free for those interested in the truth and really what relationships are about and maybe how they have been misinterpreted and also perversed in a way in our modern society. So let's get into the topic for today, which is all about outsourcing. And that might be a phrase we don't really hear in relationships or romance, but this is exactly why I'd like to share shed light on these subjects, which are much more in the shadows of relationships and these dynamics that exist among us. We live in a society that believes it can isolate parts of our needs and fulfill them through outsourcing. This is a term we hear a lot in business. If you want to do something internally, that's what that's called. And then if you want to export some of your activities or business operations, it's called outsourcing. For instance, if you're a manufacturing company and you want to build a couch, you might want to source your materials from one place, have it be manufactured outside of your business, and you are simply the reseller or the seller, retailer of those finished goods. So same way in relationships, or as we found ourselves in this weird dynamics in relationships of 2022, there's pretty much three, and I had a bonus that came up, so 4 segments that people try to isolate. And let's get into why that's not possible and what is really wrong about this approach that we might be taking. While this is a good idea in theory to separate pregnancy, let's say, from a relationship or from your own body through surrogacy, 2, it might be appealing to have a companionship that you are paying for or have a certain level of understanding with another person, but you never take it to that next level of intimacy. 3rd, it might be attractive to have your physical and sexual needs fulfilled by somebody that is outsourced from your relationship or from your life and have no strings attached, no emotional intimacy or depth. And then 4th, final, is the financial aspect. It might be once again appealing or attractive or sexy to have your financial needs met by somebody else and have other needs met by other people. But let's really break down all 4 of these and understand how this is a damaging perspective that we have, because it devalues our worth and it hinders us from experiencing unconditional true romance in this world. Let's get into surrogacy first. This idea of birth being able to be, how would you say this? External from an intimate couple. So it's become quite popular with a lot of celebrities. I forget all their names now, but it's popular for them to get somebody else, a woman, to house the whole pregnancy process, the growth of the baby. They just provide their eggs and then their partner provides the sperm. And that's all happening pretty much in a petri dish or in some form, a inorganic, unnatural, synthetic manner. You have to get a lot of laboratories involved, a lot of scientific facilities and so forth in order for this to be sustainable. If we are seeing celebrities promote anything, this is usually indicative of an agenda, and that's usually the place where we can find the deepest shadows hiding. If something is being perceived as good in front of the media, we always know that there is this whole other black side to it. So within pregnancy, a mom connects to the baby throughout the growth process. First of all, the union between a man and a woman to create life is sacred in itself, and that's very clear from any sort of spiritual context. The idea of ether being connected to all, it flowing through our bodies, through our hormones, our endocrine system, and so forth. The fact that we are able to physically connect with another and that births life through orgasms and ecstasy, that is something that's pretty miraculous that we are able to experience, because that's Mother Nature just doing its course. We are robbed of that if we decide to go for surrogacy or something that is beyond our control naturally. I will preface this by saying I understand that there are certain circumstances where people are not able to have a child being housed in their own bodies and they therefore have to default to these scenarios, and I understand that, and I fully support those situations. However, the lack of thinking through what this means for somebody who is capable of housing another human and of growing that within their bodies, it really devalues a piece of your intimate relationship with another. So as I go through this, if this is not being in alignment with your ideas or it's highly triggering to you, before just wanting to express and spew all of your emotions onto a video or any sort of commentary, please just go find somebody who's more aligned with the thought process and the conscious level you are at. So as we go forward, we take the spiritual idea of a mama connecting with the baby and also your partner connecting to the baby as it grows. And I've already discussed, if you know any of my teachings, that a relationship is this third entity. It's almost like this house that lives above a man and a woman when they are together. So you have to take care of the house, right? Otherwise it becomes run down, things leak. There's aspects of the house that break. It needs to get cleaned and dusted every so often to keep it in a sustainable manner. A relationship is no different. You have to do the same amount of maintenance, the same amount of constant upkeep in order for a relationship to truly be at its best. And within pregnancy, when you start having a couple get intimate and wanting to create life, besides just the moment of conception, beyond that, when a woman is growing a baby, there's the whole connection to the heartbeat. There's a sense of safety and comfort that a baby, an embryo, is able to grow into when it is living and growing in the same bodies that have nourished and brought it to life. So when we think of the growth process, knowing that a mama also changes in herself when she's growing a baby, there's different hormones that show up for you. Imagine, I don't know how to best describe this, but imagine you impregnating a couple, the female of two species, right? And then you removing that from her body. That body would feel very lost, confused, dazed, disoriented, disconnected from what's happening and the effect of the cause of their actions. And it's the same with humans. If we think about it, once you have created this concept that you desire a child, your body wants to step into that state of coitus. It wants to step into that place of becoming one and starting to grow a child or another being into life. And if you are exporting that, you're taking that out of your body, you're removing that entirely from your experience, this baby, this embryo is going to feel pretty out of context. It's not going to know how it's being connected to this world. The threads of life become much more fragile. And as the baby grows, there's always the beautiful moments of being able to speak to the child, of feeling that intuition growing between you and your baby, and the opportunity for you and your partner to connect with that throughout the 9 months, which is, I've heard also 10 months. It's technically like a full 10-month experience or journey for a lot of women to birth a baby. That's almost a year if you think about it, for mental preparation, physical preparation, emotional intimacy that can grow between you and your partner during these times of very high stress levels and fluctuations in your own hormones. It's a way for you to deepen your relationship and then be able to connect with the baby during these special moments. If you think about a baby's first kick and then the activeness of the baby as it's really growing into its own, you are not able to experience that if it's not in your body. And your partner is truly losing out on a whole year of this baby's coming into being if we are outsourcing our pregnancies. So that's the first segment that I wanted to cover. The second one is emotional needs. A lot of this comes through everyone's experience with companionship and what that really means for them. Companionship could be providing escort services to somebody and never having intimacy or intercourse with your clients, but having this persona of you and the other person who's exchanging your time for money, an emotional depth that is truly an illusion. And this might trigger some people. I understand that. However, I'm pretty strongly in my truth. And if this is once again resonating, please do let me know. However, we cannot outsource these things from our lives. We cannot outsource pregnancy if you are in a capable state of housing and being able to birth a baby. We cannot export or outsource emotional intimacy because we cannot separate ourselves in that manner. We are very complex beings, and all of these aspects of ourselves is one integrated human. My left hand, while it can be isolated from the movements of my right leg, it is all still connected. The same blood that flows into my fingertips is the same blood that flows into my toes. And this is the same in relationships, especially when we're talking about creating a partnership. So when one person, let's say, exchanges money or value for another person's emotional availability, as most escorts do who claim that they do not have any sort of sexual intercourse with their clients, one person, the client, is developing emotional ties with the person that they are speaking to, with these escorts, while the other person, the provider in these circumstances of the services, the escorts, are collecting the check, so to speak. And it's not the same investment from both sides. You cannot deceive yourself like this and assume that you can pay for somebody's emotional depth or connection. That's simply not how it works, because once that person on the receiving end of your desire to have emotional intimacy, as soon as they receive your payment, it is no longer an exchange from the soul, it's an exchange of material goods. And that's not emotions. You cannot, again, you cannot contain those and put them into a box and sell them as a product. So when somebody is offering to you companionship, that is still coming at a very surface level. And once again, it's never going to be what you think you're stepping into or what you would really desire or are nourished by. Now, the person who desires these services and wants to go pay for them and believes that they're receiving it, they're truly just slapping on a Band-Aid to something that's never going to heal on a soul level, because it doesn't have the space, it doesn't have the opportunity to experience real intimacy. So first of all, we had the pregnancy, the surrogacy. Second, we had the emotional needs of not those two segments of our lives being incapable of outsourced experiences individually. Third, we have the physical needs. This is the one that we are most common associated with when it comes to intimacy and relationships in general. A lot of people claim that prostitution is the oldest known profession because meeting your physical needs has always been a requirement, so to say, of our mammalian nature. That being said, and the legalization of these prostitution services with red light districts, leniency in laws, openness to non-monogamy, and relationships that are truly based on physical satisfaction. This idea of a hookup culture and no strings attached and paying for services, or again, just having physical needs met with one person, but then getting your emotional needs met with another person. This whole separation, it doesn't happen. It cannot happen in that manner, because when we are intimate physically with somebody, naturally the hormones kick in and they are released. And a part of those hormones is a love cocktail. And it is this desire for greater connection, for more intimacy, so to say, this idea of emotional understanding on both ends, that does get released. And so naturally, emotions and physicality, they are intertwined. You cannot separate them. And when you believe that you are exchanging money for sexual pleasure, again, you get into this gray area of deceiving yourself, because a lot of people who are those who pay for these types of services, they start getting attached to the other person because they start to develop feelings. And that's pretty much it's almost incapable of separation, again, because those hormones are released, and that person is in this deceptive state that they are also getting companionship from this person they are paying, and they misinterpret this agreement, this transaction, as a partnership, as a relationship, as a mutually beneficial connection with another person that means something. Now, this other person who is receiving money for their time, for their sex, they are in a completely different mind state. For them, again, this is a transaction. You play your part, you do what you have to do, and you receive your value, so to say, materially through money for that exchange. So they are never really invested in the other person. We have this idea of romanticizing relationships that are based on prostitution or commerce sex, as it's called, through films such as Pretty Woman and a lot of other shows that have probably come out now. However, it doesn't work in this manner because emotions are not tied to money, and sex cannot be tied to emotions if it is dependent on money. Because for one party, the receiver of that money, it is simply a cash transaction. And that might seem really harsh, and probably if you have been somebody who is engaging in commerce sex and believes that they have had the most profound experiences intimately, physically with someone, then just know the person on the other side of that, they're not thinking the same thing. And I can say this very confidently because I've known a lot of people who have been providing services of that sort, and I've known people who have received those services, and their mind perspectives of what's happening and what the reality is, it could not be further from each other. And so this deception exists as this brick thick wall between reality and these two people, because once again, you are unable to separate physical intimacy from love and from emotions. And once you interject that with finance, with some sort of financial exchange, one person, the person who's receiving this money, is totally checked out. You mean nothing to them. You truly don't mean anything to them. And I know that that is harsh and probably could be triggering many people, but that is the cold hard truth. They could care for you, but it's not emotional intimacy. It's not emotional connection. You cannot be vulnerable if you're receiving money for this exchange of physical pleasure. You're playing a part at that point. And again, this is coming from words of people who have played these parts, who have served men through being strippers, through being prostitutes, through being escorts of companionship. It's their language is so detached from anything that these clients believe they are receiving. And many times women have so much power in relationships. Many times we don't really talk about that. We don't notice that. However, we do. And we kind of guide relationships. We are the visionaries. Men are very present and in the now, but women are the ones leading relationships. They are the ones leading their men into the future for themselves, for their benefit, and so forth. And many times women are the escorts. They are the women, the providers of companionship to men who are pretty much very wealthy and just have no idea how to emotionally connect because they are so connected to their lower selves, their physical needs, their surface level desires, and never tapping into their heart, which is where everything lives. Fourth, we are going to discuss financial support. So as a recap, we've had the surrogacy, pregnancy, emotional needs, physical pleasures, and now we are talking about the financial support. So we have started normalizing a lot of commerce sex, and under that umbrella, it includes sugar daddies and sugar mamas. And again, I've done a lot of research into these subjects because that just fascinates me. Somebody who would be willing, and there's so many young women who don't think twice and sign up for sites just to be financially secure. And we have accepted that almost in our societies because we see it as a man being a provider to a woman. But that is nothing there's nothing further from the truth. It's not being a provider, it's being in control. And again, there are so many experiences that provide my stance on this subject that I am so certain what I'm sharing right now, which is exactly why I'm sharing it, because nobody is discussing this. And there's only the positive, like this veil that's being put on to commerce sex, and this normalization of don't shame women because they're doing this, don't shame men because they don't have time for physical intimacy or emotional intimacy or relationships. You know, it's normal to be career driven and support yourself through somebody else, or it's natural for your physical desires, or it is normal to be dependent upon men for your finances because they're buying you nice things, because you are sustaining them with conversation and so forth. This also puts men into a really bad light because they should not be engaging with women in this way. It's a completely third world perspective of how relationships work. And if you want true love and intimacy, you have to shed all of this BS that's really been accepted in our society, and people have been screaming to accept and to not be rocking the boat or be controversial. Okay, so this whole culture of finding an older provider for you, usually it's women who have just finished school or some sort of college, or they might still be in college, but they just want to earn a better living by providing men with services or their time or some sort. This all normalizes old and too young relationships. Like, this is a very big hookup culture that we are accepting, and it's really graying the lines of consent, I would say, in age and differences and how large those gaps are comfortable for society. Because you could have somebody who's in their 50s or maybe even in their 80s taking out a woman who's in her 20s and saying, well, it's fine because she's an escort, but she doesn't sleep with these men. She doesn't give them physical pleasure. It's fine. And these men are then buying these women extremely luxurious, expensive items that cost, hundreds of thousands of dollars. They're paying them for their cars, for their hotels, for their flights, for their rents. It's pretty absurd if you honestly think about it, because this one person using money has total control over your life, and we're acting as if that's empowering women in some sort of way. And many women have had bad experiences. They have had experiences where people don't know how to say, they don't know how to receive a no. And it's become this struggle because one person has so much power and so much authority in the relationship, and the other person is pretty much just their slave for the sake of money. So to really get into this subject, it needs its own master class or some sort of explanation, a deep dive for these sugar daddies and sugar mamas and this whole culture that has been normalized financial support in these matters. However, just to keep it related to this outsourcing idea, you cannot outsource your need for finance in exchange for any sort of companionship or physical pleasure. You cannot sell your body like this. And that's where I'm getting at with this outsourcing. All of these exchanges of money for a woman or a man's time or body in some way, whether it's surrogacy, pregnancy, sperm donations, egg freezing, all that, physical manipulation, emotional needs, physical desires, and financial support, these are all selling your body, which would equal prostitution, because it is a disconnect from nature. And if it's disconnected from nature, it's not divine. Because everything is on a spectrum. And if one thing can be divine and holy, and if another, and all of nature is divine and holy. But if there is a transgression from the norm, and it is on the opposite side, and it is no longer healthy because it's deceiving, it's deceptive, then it's not going to work. Because all of these areas that I've shared, pregnancy, starting a family, emotions, intimacy, finance, they're all interconnected. You're one human. As I mentioned about the body parts, there's no separation. If we can identify that we are isolating by deceiving ourselves, we can start to open up an honest conversation about these subjects and question their morality. Is it really okay if you're 18 years old that you're going out with a man who's maybe 45 and is buying you shoes and lingerie and clothes that he wants to see you in? Is it normal for us to pay somebody to have a deep conversation with? Is it normal that you are unable to be vulnerable with people in your life and call those people in who resonate with you as your true essence? Is it normal to sacrifice that for 90 minutes of conversation over dinner with somebody that you're going to pay $1,500 and walk away, knowing that they are freaking glad that they made that money and they don't give a shit about you, but you, on the other hand, walk away feeling happy, feeling connected to what though? What are you connected to if the other person is not receiving your connection? All of these methods, especially emotional intimacy, I would say, and financial support, it assumes that the presence of someone, a presence of a woman, a presence of a man, the quality of that presence, of that openness, of that listening, of that opening of the heart so you can have a real connection, true intimacy, depth in your conversations, understanding of where you're coming from, what your values are, where you're headed in life, what you want, how do you interact with the world. That all of that can be quantified by a certain number and it can be exchanged with cash, which is meaningless. But in the reality of things, these physical experiences, being financially empowered and free, emotional intimacy, pregnancy, that is priceless. All of those experiences. It cannot be isolated and compartmentalized into a budget because none of these things are tangible. None of these things can be quantified. This mutual exchange of energy is outside the realm of money. It is outside the realm of physical sensations as we know it in the material world. It is all a connection through the spirit, through the heart, through our yonis, through a man's body. All of that has ethereal substance to it. And we can't disconnect that either. So if we cannot take out the spiritual from our love life, we cannot sell any part of our love life. We can't do it. Surrogacy, the way it's being normalized, I do think that it's prostitution of a woman's body. A woman's body is not for sale. You cannot sell yourself and your womb. Now, again, I've mentioned this and I'll say it again. If you cannot have a child and this is a good cause, I do think there are circumstances for surrogacy pregnancies. But for us to normalize it and just say, I don't want to house the baby. I'm too scared. I want to have my perfect body. I don't know how to do birth. I'm not interested. I'm scared. I don't want to do it. Whatever reason. It's not trendy now to have a baby in that manner. None of that goes with true love. None of that goes with intimacy and monogamy and a centering in real relationships. Thank you. I hope this has been educational. Please do leave a comment on what your thoughts are. Has this surprised you? What did you learn? And would you want me to go further in depth into any of these subjects? Thank you so much for watching. Have a wonderful day.